by a time right here in Congress as a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, where I spearheaded the investigation that exposed serious FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, abuses by members of the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That misconduct eroded the public trust in our FBI. The erosion of trust, as Chairman Grassley pointed out, is all too low today. 40% of Americans have trust in the FBI. In order to get it back, there's a twofold track, Senator. One, violent crime is exploding in this country, and we cannot afford them to allow it to run away. We must tackle violent crime. Just in 2023 alone, there was 100,000 rapes, 100,000 drug overdoses, and 17,000 homicides. The priority of the FBI, if I'm confirmed, will be to ensure that our communities are protected and safeguarded and our children have parks to play in and not needles to walk over. The way we do this, we let good cops be cops. We let law enforcement and we provide them with the tools necessary and resources they need to get after violent crime. The second way we do this on equal track is aggressive constitutional oversight from Congress. The public trust can only be restored if there is full transparency, and I am committed to that full transparency. Members of Congress have unfortunately submitted hundreds of questions that have been unanswered by the FBI in recent times. That will not occur if I am confirmed. All appropriate requests for information will be responded to expeditiously and fully. I am committed to working alongside the dedicated men and women of the FBI. They are warriors of justice, and I will always have their backs because they have the backs of the American people. I look forward to answering your questions, and I want to take a moment to thank my family, my friends, people who traveled here, and my entire team that has made this day possible. God bless America, and I look forward to your questions.
The statement that he has up does say without trial, and I think that plays some role in the context of that statement. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, welcome. Let me first of all say thank you. Thank you for saying yes when President Trump asked you to serve in this role. I think there are very few roles in all of government that are more important than director of the FBI, and there are very few roles in all of government that are more in need of a fundamental change. You and I have both spent much of our adult lives working in and around law enforcement. And the loss of respect from the American people of the FBI and of the Department of Justice is one of the most tragic developments of the last 4 years. Both the Department of Justice and the FBI have a long history of being apolitical, outside of politics, of being faithful to and focused on upholding the rule of law and keeping the American people safe. And in many ways, the worst legacy, in my opinion, of the Biden administration was the complete politicization and weaponization of both the Department of Justice and the FBI, turning them into tools to attack the perceived enemies of the Biden White House. Now, you have been charged with going in and restoring integrity of the FBI. That is not going to be an easy task. But before you can carry out that task, and I am confident you will be confirmed and you will be in the position to carry out that task, you've got to make it through the gauntlet of the Senate Judiciary Committee and my colleagues on the Democrat side of the aisle who, I don't know how many spots on Senator Tillis's bingo card have been filled, but it looks like he's playing blackout and they're all filled right now. But you will be and have been accused of just about everything they can, but I want to focus on what several Democrats have done recently, which is trying to blame you for the violence that occurred on January 6th, which even in the annals of ridiculous attacks, this one really takes the cake. So let's just focus on some facts. Let me ask you a question. What role did you occupy in the days immediately before January 6th?
Chief of Staff of the Department of Defense.
You were the Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense.
Yes, sir.
So to be clear, you were not rioting at the Capitol.
No, sir.
Okay. Where were you physically on January 6th?
In the Office of the Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon.
And what were you doing on that day?
On that day specifically, responding to preparing to mobilize and deploy the National Guard once we got the lawful request from the local governing authority, which was the mayor of D.C. and the Speaker of the House.
Now, how many days in advance were you working to prepare the Department of Defense to help secure the Capitol on January 6th?
Days in advance, Senator, we were in the Oval Office on an unrelated national security matter with the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself. And the President authorized up to 20,000 plus National Guardsmen and women to secure any security measures necessary related to the Capitol. So we were moving to the fullest extent of the law before the requisite request came from a local governing authority days ahead of time.
And while you were Chief of Staff at DOD, how many times did DOD approach Capitol Police and ask if they needed National Guard assistance?
I believe those letters are well documented, numerous instances, and in numerous of those instances, those requests were shut down.
Now, am I correct that the Capitol Sergeant at Arms said assistance was unnecessary?
That's correct, Senator.
Who did the Sergeant at Arms report to?
The Speaker of the House.
That would have been Nancy Pelosi at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And would that also be Chuck Schumer, then the Senate Majority Leader?
The Sergeant at Arms, yes, Senator, reports up there.
Did Mayor Bowser, the Democrat elected mayor in D.C., either request or allow National Guard assistance?
She put in writing on the days leading up to January 6th a declination for National Guard additional support. And that letter is available publicly to the world.
And just to speak English for folks at home, a declination meant she said no, don't send National Guard. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a simple question, because from the questioning from my Democrat colleagues, they might think otherwise. Do you condemn violence against law enforcement?
All of it.
And by the way, is that true whether the violence is right-wing or left-wing or anywhere else?
There is no discriminating between types of violence against law enforcement.
And do you believe those who assault and commit violence against law enforcement should be prosecuted and should be sent to jail?
Especially those that kill them.
Let me ask you, how many years have you worked in public service?
About 16, Senator.
And how many years have you worked in particular in law enforcement and prosecution and national security?
Over a decade, Senator.
You know, I have to say it is ludicrous but sadly predictable that Democrats are endeavoring to tarnish you, to paint a false caricature based on innuendo and smoke. And so you're working to protect the Capitol on January 6th, and yet they're trying to blame you for the violence that occurred. Let me ask you this just as a straightforward matter. What is the job of the FBI, and what will the FBI's role be if and when you are confirmed as its director?
The simple motto on the website of the FBI's homepage is to protect American citizens and uphold the Constitution. If I am confirmed as the next director of the FBI, that's what we're going to do, and redirect resources to making sure that occurs every single day.
Thank you for your willingness to do so, and this committee will hold you to account on restoring integrity at the FBI, and I thank you also for your commitment to transparency. I think that is incredibly important to bringing back integrity, and I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Patel, in the first round of questioning, you and I talked about the politicization and weaponization of the FBI and the Department of Justice. That has significant negative consequences in terms of undermining trust in the FBI and the Department of Justice and abusing the power of the FBI and the Department of Justice. But it also has consequences in that it diverts resources at the FBI and DOJ from urgent law enforcement and national security priorities. I will tell you, when I go back home to Texas, I am somewhat regularly asked by Texans, should we abolish the FBI? Now, my answer to that is an emphatic no. The FBI has a critical mission of stopping bad guys, whether serial killers or human traffickers or child molesters or terrorists. But it says something that a sizable percentage of America has so lost faith in the Bureau that they believe it should be shut down. I think allowing the FBI to be politicized has resulted in far too little attention being placed on very serious national security risks that we face right now, including for the last 4 years. As a result of the open borders that we've had, over 12 million illegal immigrants have come into this country. And I believe as a consequence of that, we face a greater risk today of a major terrorist attack than we have at any time since September 11th, 2001. You have well over a decade of experience in national security and law enforcement. In your judgment, do you agree with me as to the magnitude of the threat we face right now of a potential terrorist attack?
It's as high as I've ever seen it, Senator.
And describe to this committee what the FBI should be doing to prevent future terrorist attacks.
Working hand in glove with our intelligence community and obtaining information that directly relates to the FBI's criminal mandate on an intelligence basis, and thwarting and prosecuting and stopping any terrorist attacks here and any homegrown activities abroad that are directed at the United States of America, along with countermanding the CCP espionage rings in this country, which dovetail with the foreign terrorist organization activity.
Does it concern you that Customs and Border Patrol in the previous administration instructed Border Patrol agents in particular to be on the lookout for Hamas or Hezbollah or Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists crossing our southern border? Does that concern you as a risk to Americans across the country?
That, along with the fact that the prior Homeland Secretary and the prior FBI director testified to Congress that there are dozens of known foreign terrorist affiliates in the United States of America, and they don't know where they are.
And it will be your priority to stop them. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Patel. Thank you for being here. And thank you for visiting with me in my office at almost exactly the moment that you were talking to me. The Department of Justice was firing more than a dozen lawyers who worked with the special counsel, Jack Smith, simply because they were involved in that case. You've committed that the FBI will not be politicized. So here's your first test. Will you commit that you will not tolerate the firing of the FBI agents who worked with the special counsel's office on these investigations?
Senator, I appreciate the time to visit with you.
It is a yes or no answer, and it is your first test.
Senator, every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard, and no one will be terminated for case assignments.
And I'm not going to accept that answer, because if you can't commit that those FBI agents will be protected from political retribution, we can't accept you as FBI director.
All FBI employees will be protected against political retribution.
Those individuals deserve to be protected from Trump retribution. That was your first test. You failed it.
By saying all FBI employees should be protected?
That is a test of professional diligence, because it is the measure of whether you will stand up and say no to the president if he gives you an unlawful or illegal order. Let me turn to the J6 choir. You know who the J6 prison choir is, don't you?
It's been referenced earlier, yes.
And you know about the song that, in fact, you produced, you promoted, and you used to, as you put it, raise awareness and support for the political prisoners still locked in jail. Those J6 choir, were they political prisoners?
I don't know everyone in the J6 choir.
That's what you said.
That's
correct?
not how I read it, Senator.
This is your tweet. That's your whole statement.
Well, I'm
You
reading
won't
it
stand
now.
behind your own statements made in tweets, countless of them. As a matter of fact, as you put it to Steve Bannon on his show, then we went into a studio and recorded it, mastered it, digitized it, and put it as a song, now releasing it exclusively in the War Room. That was the J6 prison choir song.
And all proceeds were given away to charity to help families
And you
in
called
need.
them political prisoners. Julian Cater, do you know what he did?
I don't know who that is, Senator.
Well, he's one of the J6 prison choir.
You seem to know more about
Identified
it than I do.
in a court filing. And you're saying now you don't know who he is? You glorified him and the rest of that choir? He's the one who sprayed U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick with pepper spray. Officer Sicknick died the next day. Cater admitted his violence. He pleaded guilty to assaulting assaulting a political officer, a police officer. Do you believe that Julian Cater was a political prisoner?
Senator, I'm not familiar with his case. You seem to know a lot more about it than I do. And as I've said repeatedly, I will always utilize my resources to help Americans in need, which is what I was trying to do here. And I have never once advocated for political violence or violence against law enforcement.
Ryan Nichols. Ryan Nichols also pleaded guilty to assaulting a police officer. He was one of the J6 choir. He pushed the crowd against officers defending a door to the Capitol and sprayed officers with pepper spray. Is Ryan Nichols a political prisoner?
Same answer, Senator.
How about Jordan Mink, another member of the J6 choir?
I don't know who he is.
James McGrew, a political prisoner?
I don't know who that is.
James McGrew pushed and struck officers and launched a handrail toward them. And you glorified him. You promoted and produced a song to raise money for them. And you now want us to believe you don't know who they are?
No part of that song or anything I've done in my 16 years of government service glorifies or advocates for violence against law enforcement. And the fact that you would be willing to say that in front of these people in the American audience shows how much of a divide we actually have to restore a law enforcement that is constitutionally based, de-weaponized, and depoliticized. You have my commitment to do that. In your office, we had a lot of common ground. I'm committed to working with you on things like Section 230 and making sure the citizens of Connecticut aren't pillaged by Chinese fentanyl.
I welcome your statement, Mr. Patel, but it doesn't answer my question. And it doesn't go to your credibility in denying you know who these people are after, and I have to say, in this tweet and in others, I have a raft of them. I'm going to ask the chairman that they be made a part of the record. If there's no objection.
Without objection.
You glorified, you promoted, you supported these individuals. Ronald Sadlin, he struck an officer in the head, hand, and shoulders and grabbed another officer. Was he a political prisoner?
I don't know who that is, Senator.
Well, the simple fact is that you knew about the J6 choir. You knew what they did in assaulting and endangering police officers who sought to defend the Capitol on that day, were severely injured, and some, as a consequence, died. I think the FBI deserves better. The men and women in the FBI put their lives on the line every day. I've worked with them as United States Attorney for 4.5 years, and then as Attorney General off and on for 20 years. I've admired them for the 14 years that I've been in this body. I think they deserve better. Thank you.
Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of this distinguished committee. I'm humbled to be sitting here today as President Trump's nominee oversee the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I want to thank President Trump for entrusting me to deliver on his promise to make America healthy again. I also want to thank Cheryl and Kik and Bobby and all of my other children who are here today, and all the many members of my large extended family for the love that they have so generously shared. Ours has always been a family that has been involved in public service, and I look forward to continuing that tradition. My journey into the issue of health began with my career as an environmental attorney, working with hunters and fishermen and mothers in the small town in the Hudson Valley and along the Hudson River. I learned very early on that human health and environmental injuries are intertwined. The same chemicals that kill fish make people sick also. Today, Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% a year. Autoimmune diseases, neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, asthma, ADHD, depression, addiction, and a host of other physical and mental health conditions are all on the rise, some of them exponentially. The United States has worse health than any other developed nation, yet we spend more on healthcare, at least double, and in some cases triple, as other countries. Last year, we spent $4.8 trillion, not counting the indirect costs of missed work. That's almost a fifth of GDP. It's tantamount to a 20% tax on the entire economy. No wonder America has trouble competing with countries that pay a third of what we do for health and have better outcomes and a healthier workforce. But I don't want to make this too much about money. It's the human tragedy that moves us to care. President Trump has promised to restore America's global strength and to restore the American dream, but he understands we can't be a strong nation when our people are so sick. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person has only one. Today, over half of our countrymen and women are chronically ill. When I met with President Trump last summer, I discovered that he is more than just concern for this tragic situation, but genuine care. President Trump is committed to restoring the American dream, and 77 million Americans delivered a mandate to him to do just that, due in part to the embrace and elevation of the Make America Healthy Again movement. This movement, led largely by Maha moms from every state, you can see many of them behind us today, and in the hallways and in the lobbies, is one of the most transcendent and powerful movements I've ever seen. I promise President Trump that if confirmed, I will do everything in my power to put the health of Americans back on track. And I've been greatly heartened to discover a deep level of care among members of this committee, too, both Democrats and Republicans. I came away from our conversations confident that we can put aside our divisions for the sake of a healthier America. For a long time, the nation has been locked in a divisive healthcare debate about who pays. Well, when healthcare costs reach 20%, there are no good options, only bad ones. Shifting the burden around between government and corporations and insurers and providers and families is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Our country will sink beneath a sea of desperation and debt if we don't change the course and ask why are healthcare costs so high in the first place. The obvious answer is chronic disease. The CDC says 90% of healthcare spending goes toward managing chronic disease, which hits lower income Americans the hardest. The president's pledge is not to make some Americans healthy again, but to make all of our people healthy again. There is no single culprit in chronic disease. Much as I have criticized certain industries and agencies, President Trump and I understand that most of their scientists and experts genuinely care about American health. Therefore, we will bring together all stakeholders in pursuit of this unifying goal. Before I conclude, I want to make that has been involved in public service, and I look forward to continuing that tradition. My journey into the issue of health began with my career as an environmental attorney, working with hunters and fishermen and mothers in the small town in the Hudson Valley and along the Hudson River. I learned very early on that human health and environmental injuries are intertwined. The same chemicals that kill fish make people sick also. Today, Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% economy. No wonder America has trouble competing with countries that pay a third of what we do for health and have better outcomes and a healthier workforce. But I don't want to make this too much about money. It's the human tragedy that moves us to care. President Trump has promised to restore America's global strength and to restore the American dream, but he understands that we can't be a strong nation when our people are so sick. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams. A sick person has only one. Today, over half of our countrymen and women are chronically ill. When I met with President Trump last summer, I discovered that he is more than just concern for this tragic situation, but genuine care. President Trump is committed to restoring the American dream, and 77 million Americans delivered a mandate to him to do just that, due in part to the embrace and elevation of the Make America Healthy Again movement. This movement, led largely by Maha moms from every state, you can see many of them behind us today, and in the hallways and in the lobbies, is one of the most transcendent and powerful movements I've ever seen. I promise President Trump that if confirmed, I will do everything in my power to put the health of Americans back on track. And I've been greatly heartened to discover a deep level of care among members of this committee too, both Democrats and Republicans. I came away from our conversations confident that we can put aside our divisions for the sake of a healthier America. For a long time, the nation has been locked in a divisive healthcare debate about who pays. Well, when healthcare costs reach 20%, there are no good options, only bad ones. Shifting the burden around between government and corporations and insurers and providers and families is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Our country will sink beneath a sea of desperation and debt if we don't change the course and ask why are healthcare costs so high in the first place. The obvious answer is chronic disease. The CDC says 90% of healthcare spending goes toward managing chronic disease, which hits lower income Americans the hardest. The president's pledge is not to make some Americans healthy again, but to make all of our people healthy again. There is no single culprit in chronic disease. Much as I have criticized certain industries and agencies, President Trump and I understand that most of their scientists and experts genuinely care about American health. Therefore, we will bring together all stakeholders in pursuit of this unifying goal. Before I conclude, I want to make sure the committee is clear about a few things. News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
We'll have order. Please proceed, Mr. Kennedy.
I am pro-safety. I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. And I believe that that vaccines play a critical role in healthcare. All of my kids are vaccinated. I've written many books on vaccines. My first book in 2014, the first line of it is, I am not anti-vaccine, and the last line is, I am not anti-vaccine. Nor am I the enemy of food producers. American farms are the bedrock of our culture, of our politics, of our national security. I was a 4-H kid, and I spent my summer working on ranches. I went to work with our farmers. I want to work with our farmers and food producers to remove burdensome regulations and unleash American ingenuity. MAHA simply cannot succeed without a partnership, a full partnership of American farmers. In my advocacy, I've often disturbed the status quo by asking uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not going to apologize for that. We have massive health problems in this country that we must face honestly. And the first thing I've done every morning for the past 20 years is to get on my knees and pray to God that he would put me in a position to end the chronic disease epidemic and to help America's children. That's why I'm so grateful to President Trump for the opportunity to sit before you today and seek your support and partnership in this endeavor. I will conclude with a promise. The members of this committee, to the president, and to all the tens of millions of parents across America, especially the moms, who have propelled this issue to center stage. Should I be so privileged as to be confirmed?
I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low.